You know, she never thought you'd actually leave. In her mind, you were always the fallback, the constant, the one she could walk away from and come back to whenever life got quiet or lonely. She thought you'd always be there, waiting, hoping, checking in, emotionally available on demand, like a safety net that never breaks. But something shifted, something she never expected. You stopped. You stopped chasing her attention. You stopped needing her to validate your worth. You stopped showing up for someone who only ever made you feel like a second option. And that's when the silence began to speak louder than words ever could. At first she was confused, then came the shock, and somewhere between the stillness and the absence, it hit her. Regret. Not because she suddenly remembered everything you did for her, but because the version of you she left behind started becoming the man she never believed you could be. This isn't just about a breakup. No, it goes way deeper than that. This is about growth. This is about becoming. Have you ever noticed how people don't start questioning your value until you stop giving them access to it? It's a strange truth. When you're always there, always reachable, you get taken for granted. But the moment you choose yourself, everything changes. That's what happened here. You didn't just move on. You evolved. You stopped orbiting her world and finally started building your own. And in doing so, you triggered something far more powerful than jealousy. You forced a shift in how she saw you and how you started seeing yourself. Because sometimes the real transformation doesn't begin when someone walks away. It begins when you finally stop waiting for them to come back. This is your moment, not to prove anything to her, but to prove everything to yourself. Real detachment doesn't happen with some big final speech. There's no dramatic text, no emotional exit. You don't stand in front of a mirror and say, "I'm done." Because when a man truly lets go, it happens quietly, from the inside out. You see, chasing someone isn't always about blowing up their phone or begging them to come back. No, most of the time, it's deeper. It's in the way your thoughts still orbit around her name. It's in how you replay old messages, read between the lines of her silence, or wait for a status update just to feel something. That's the chasing most people never see. But it's the kind that drains you the most. And the moment you decide to stop, that's when everything begins to shift. You stop checking when she was last online. You stop wondering if she saw your story. You stop searching for closure in silence. And instead, you start coming home to yourself. You reclaim the mental and emotional space she used to rent for free. You begin investing that same energy into your career, your body, your peace of mind. And the change, it's not temporary. It's not a Band-Aid fix to numb the pain. It's identity-level transformation. Because you're not just moving on. You're becoming the man you were always meant to be before you handed your worth to someone else. And let me tell you something. That kind of shift, it doesn't just free you from her. It unlocks a version of you that no longer needs her approval to feel whole. So if you're in that place right now, sitting in the quiet, just know the silence isn't empty. It's where the healing starts. You might not think she notices, but she does. Not in the way you used to hope for. She's not texting you out of the blue or showing up at your door. But something inside her has shifted, quietly, subtly. Because women, whether we admit it or not, are deeply intuitive. She may not say it out loud. She may not even fully understand it herself. But she feels it, the emotional withdrawal. That invisible cord she used to tug whenever she wanted to feel wanted, it's gone. And with it, the power she once held without even trying. See, emotional power doesn't always come from control or manipulation. Sometimes it's just the unspoken knowing that you'll still care. That no matter how long she goes silent, you'll still check in. That even if she walks away, you'll still be orbiting her emotionally, but not anymore. Now, the silence is real. The attention is gone. The space she used to occupy in your heart and mind has been reclaimed by you. And here's what most people don't talk about. When that emotional power disappears, it doesn't create regret at first. It creates confusion. She starts to wonder, why isn't he reacting? Why doesn't he care anymore? Did I lose something real, or did I misread him completely? And that internal conflict, it's not about missing you. It's about losing access to the version of you that once needed her validation to feel whole. But you're not that man anymore. Now you're centered. Now you're whole. Now your peace is no longer something she can disrupt on a whim. And that shift, it's subtle, but it's powerful. Because when a man no longer needs her attention to feel like a man, that's when she starts to see the difference between being desired and being unreachable. Here's something most men were never taught, not by their fathers, not in school, not even from their closest friends. Emotional availability is a currency, and just like any currency, when you give it away too easily to someone who doesn't truly value it, it loses its worth. Now let's be clear, this doesn't mean you were wrong for caring. It doesn't mean your loyalty, your patience, your consistency were weaknesses. In fact, those are beautiful traits when they're offered to someone who sees them for the treasures they are. But if you're always emotionally available, if your heart's always open, your support always offered, your presence always guaranteed, it stops feeling rare. It becomes background noise. Like a song that's been playing too long in the background, she stops hearing it. Not because she meant to ignore you, but because your consistency became something she expected, not something she appreciated. And here's the part no one prepares us for. When you go silent, when you finally stop offering that emotional currency freely, it's disarming. It messes with her internal rhythm. It throws off the pattern. Why? Because now she has to recalibrate everything she thought she knew about you. Suddenly, you're not the man who always replies. You're not the emotional safety net. You're the man who stepped back, who chose peace, who stopped showing up where he wasn't seen. And that shift, it isn't just confusing, it's powerful, because it forces her to confront a new version of you, one that no longer gives himself away for free, one who finally understands the value of his emotional presence. That's not cold, that's not calculated, that's clarity. And clarity, my friend, is where real power begins. At first, she doesn't say anything. No text, no call, no apology. But deep down, the questions start to form. Was I wrong about him? Did I misjudge who he really was? Did I walk away from someone who was actually good for me? And let's be honest, these aren't questions that come from pride. They come from something deeper, a disruption in how she used to see you. Because the man you're becoming, he's not the man she thought you were when she left. He's more focused, more grounded, more centered. You're growing. And with every step forward you take, she feels a little further away from the story you're now writing. And that's what starts to eat at her. Not just the loss of you, but the fact that she's no longer part of your transformation. You see, when someone assumes you'll always stay stuck, always waiting, it gives them a certain comfort, a belief that they can come and go and you'll still be there. But the moment that changes, when you stop waiting and start becoming, it sends shockwaves through that illusion. Now she's not just comparing you to who you were, she's comparing herself to the man you've become. And that reflection, it's uncomfortable because maybe she hasn't grown the same way. Maybe she's realizing that she underestimated not just you, but the potential she walked away from. And here's the powerful part. The more you rise, the more she realizes. She's no longer in the frame. She's not the inspiration behind your success. She's not the reason for your peace. You are. And that truth, it echoes louder than any words ever could. Let's talk about something that's often misunderstood. Silence. Not the cold kind, not the passive-aggressive kind. I'm talking about the kind of silence that comes from clarity, from purpose, from growth. See, when a man reaches a certain point on his journey, he doesn't need to argue anymore. He doesn't need to send that final message, post a cryptic quote, or try to prove anything to anyone. He just goes quiet. And that silence, it's not revenge. It's not a power move. It's self-respect. Because real emotional independence begins the moment he no longer needs her reaction to validate his feelings. He stops wondering if she saw his story, stops checking if she liked that post, stops holding his breath, hoping for that what-if message to show up. And instead, he breathes again. Now ask yourself this, how often have you mistaken being quiet for being weak? The truth is, silence isn't weakness. It's discipline. It's the strength to stop explaining yourself to someone who already made a choice to walk away. It's the courage to walk into a new season without needing closure, applause, or acknowledgement. Because the moment you stop needing her to understand your pain, you set yourself free. You're not asking for her to see you anymore. You've already seen yourself. And in that stillness, in that deep calm, you take your power back. It's not about shutting down. It's about leveling up. It's about becoming a man whose peace isn't negotiable. And that kind of silence, it doesn't scream. But make no mistake, it speaks volumes. Here's the thing most men don't realize. Even when she's silent, she's still watching. Not in the way you might expect. There's no grand gesture, no heartfelt apology. But late at night, when the world gets quiet, she scrolls. She checks your profile. She watches your stories without reacting. She clicks your photos, lingers for just a few extra seconds, then scrolls away like nothing happened. But something did. It's not always about missing you. Sometimes it's about curiosity, a kind of emotional dissonance. Because in her mind, you were supposed to stay stuck. You were supposed to keep orbiting, keep wondering, keep reaching, but you didn't. And that's what's throwing her off. Now she's trying to make sense of the change. So she does what many people do when they don't understand their own emotions. She tests the waters. A casual, "Hey, how have you been?" A random emoji reaction to a story. Maybe a like on an old post she knows you'll see. But none of it comes from clarity. It comes from conflict. She's not reaching out because she knows what she wants. She's reaching out because she can feel the emotional door starting to close. And that scares her. Because once you stop giving her your energy, your attention, your emotional presence, she realizes she doesn't know where she stands in your life anymore. And people hate uncertainty, especially when they were once the center of your world. So don't be surprised if the signs show up in small ways. They may seem harmless, but they're not random. They're signals. Not necessarily that she wants you back, but that she can feel, maybe for the first time, that you're no longer hers to reach. You see, not every woman will reach out. Some will stay completely silent, but don't mistake that silence for peace, because deep down, she feels the shift. Even if she doesn't text you, even if she never says a word, she knows something is different. Because emotional energy doesn't need a notification to be felt. She can sense that you're not looking her way anymore. She can feel that she's no longer sitting at the center of your emotional universe. And that, right there, that's the part she didn't expect. She thought you'd always react, always notice, always be around in some invisible emotional way. But now your world moves without her. And that change, it doesn't scream, it doesn't need to, because it shows up in the most powerful way possible. You've become indifferent, not bitter, not cold, just calm. See, indifference is different from anger. Anger still gives energy. It still shows you care. But indifference, that's when you've stopped offering any part of yourself, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And that's what shakes her the most, because it means she no longer holds any sway over how you feel. She can't pull a reaction, can't trigger a response, can't sense that lingering hope she used to count on. You've taken your power back, not to punish her, not to prove a point, but because you finally realize she doesn't get to live rent-free in your mind anymore. And when that emotional access is gone, it doesn't just disappear, it echoes. She feels it. And no matter how silent she stays, she'll know. The door she once walked through without knocking is now locked. Here's the part no one tells you about growth. It doesn't just change you. It changes how other people see themselves in your presence. Because when a man starts to rise, when he begins healing, evolving, building himself piece by piece, it becomes impossible to ignore, especially for the person who once had emotional power over him. And whether she admits it or not, your growth becomes a mirror, one she wasn't prepared to look into. Now she's not just asking, "What happened to us?" She's asking, "Why didn't I see this version of him before? Did I walk away too soon? Was I blinded by my own assumptions?" Your transformation forces her to reflect on three uncomfortable truths. First, her timing. Did she give up right before everything started to change? Did she leave during your breaking point, not knowing it was the start of your breakthrough? Second, her perception. She saw you through a limited lens. Maybe as too emotional, too available, too safe. But now, you've outgrown that box. You're not who you were. You're who you were always meant to be. And third, her loss of emotional control. She no longer gets to influence your mood, your energy, your direction. That emotional pull, it's gone. And that realization stings, not out of cruelty, but because she miscalculated what you could become. See, people often don't notice what they had until it becomes something they can no longer reach. And you didn't just survive the pain, you transformed it. That transformation didn't just set you free. It reminded her that letting you go wasn't just a choice, it was a gamble. And now she's facing the truth. You became the man she never imagined losing. There's a moment when everything shifts, not because you said anything, but because you finally stopped saying anything at all. That silence, it's not empty, it's not passive. It speaks volumes. It tells her something she never expected to hear. I don't need closure anymore. You've stopped waiting for explanations, apologies, or one last conversation. You've stopped checking for a message that might never come, because you've realized you were never truly waiting for her. You were waiting for yourself. And now that you've found your center, something powerful has happened. She no longer sees the version of you she once knew. You've become unrecognizable to her, not because you've changed your number, not because you blocked her, but because the man she thought would stay stuck didn't. She expected to be missed, to feel needed, but instead she feels something entirely different, replaced, not by another woman, but by your purpose, by your healing, by your vision, by the peace you finally found when you stopped making her the main character in your story. And here's what hits hardest. This isn't a phase. It's not a show you're putting on to prove a point. This isn't about look at what you lost. This is who you've become. Because growth is no longer something you do to cope. It's your lifestyle now. It shows up in your confidence, in your choices, in how you move through the world without needing to be seen by her. You're no longer the man chasing love to feel whole. You're the man who built himself from the ground up and discovered he already was. And to her, that version of you, it's not just unfamiliar, it's untouchable. You know what real healing looks like? It's not loud. It's not some big moment you post about. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It's quiet. It happens in the stillness of late nights when you no longer flinch at the sound of her name, when someone brings her up in conversation and your heart doesn't sink, it just stays calm. That's emotional immunity, not numbness, not indifference out of bitterness, but peace, genuine peace that came from doing the hard work most people run from. You didn't get here overnight. You didn't wake up one day and feel fixed. No, this came from sitting in the silence, from facing the parts of yourself that felt shattered and slowly putting them back together, piece by piece. You stopped waiting for her to explain. You stopped needing her to see your worth. You stopped chasing closure and started creating it for yourself. And now, her approval doesn't move you. Her silence doesn't shake you. Her attention isn't the prize you're after anymore. Because somewhere along this journey, you realized you were never broken. You were just learning to stop giving your power to someone else. And that shift, it's everything. Because once you become emotionally immune to the person who once had the ability to unravel you, you're free. You're not proving anything. You're just living, grounded, focused, whole. So if you've gotten to that point or you're on your way, know this: you didn't lose her. You found you. And that, my friend, is the most powerful win of all. There's a quiet kind of strength in realizing she's no longer part of your story. Not because you're angry, not because you're trying to erase her, but because you've simply outgrown her. There was a time when everything you did still had her in mind. Every decision, every move, every step forward felt like it needed her approval, or at least her attention. But not anymore. Now your story unfolds without her, not in spite, not to prove something, but because you finally see life with clarity, not emotion. She was once the central character in your emotional script. She had lines, scenes, entire chapters. And maybe back then, you thought that story would keep going. But something shifted. You stopped rereading the same lines. You stopped waiting for her to make a surprise comeback. You picked up the pen and started writing a new chapter. A chapter where your peace isn't tied to her presence. A chapter where your purpose has nothing to do with how she feels about you. A chapter that no longer includes her name on every page. And this isn't about deleting the past. It's about no longer living in it. You're not stuck in the version of yourself that needed her to feel whole. You've grown, you've risen, you've healed. She may still be rereading the version of you she knew, but you're no longer that man. You've moved on. Not because you had to, but because you were finally ready to. And that's the beautiful part. You didn't turn the page out of pain. You did it with purpose. Welcome to the chapter she never saw coming, the one where you thrive without her. There comes a moment in a man's life when he looks back and realizes he doesn't need her anymore. Not in a bitter way, not in a look what you missed kind of way, but in a quiet, grounded, deeply personal truth. He has evolved. What he once thought was love was really a reflection of his own unfinished growth. What he once saw as connection was actually a call for validation. But now, he's not chasing anything. Not attention, not closure, not her. Because this was never about revenge. This was about transcendence. About rising beyond the version of yourself that needed to be chosen. About walking into a new identity where your masculinity isn't measured by how much you give to someone else, but how deeply rooted you are in who you are. And listen, if you're watching this, chances are you've felt that shift. Or maybe you're in it right now. That uncomfortable space between letting go and becoming. You're not alone. There's a brotherhood of men out here. Men who've chosen growth over grudges, peace over drama, power over approval. This is a space for them, for us, for you. So if this message hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, comment, subscribe. Not just for the algorithm, but for the man out there who's drowning in silence, who thinks he's the only one feeling what you felt. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're becoming. And when men support men through transformation, we don't just heal individually, we rise together. This isn't just a video. This is a movement. Let's build it. One man, one story, one breakthrough at a time.